and live streamed, as you probably are aware, but it is being recorded. I know Liz has switched that on, so we'll go from here now. If you're in your office in here, not in the office in here, please raise your hand so that I can see if you want to speak. If not, if you're on hybrid, then please raise your hand there electronically, and we will come to you then. Just for the benefit of members who are not here, we have myself and Liz alongside me. We have Julie and cabinet member Louise and Chris, and we've got Wendy as well. Yeah, pleasure for me to welcome 2 new members, effectively eventually, but certainly one year. Mark in particular, very good to see you. Nice to have you along, and we do need to bring some new fresh blood onto this committee. Hopefully there won't be too much blood, but we're very pleased to have you along. So welcome to everybody else and to all the officers, as I said. And I will move on now, if I may, to item 1 on the agenda, which is apologies for absence. Liz?
We've received one apology, Chair, from Dave House.
Okay, so there are a couple of people who will probably join us, I think, as we go through the meeting, and we'll wait for them to come then on that basis. Item 2 is disclosures of interest. If anybody's got any disclosures that they feel they need to make at this time. Cheryl, you've got your hand up.
Post family associate working within Child and Family Services.
Okay, thank you. And Liz will send you the necessary form to sign afterwards there, Cheryl. Item 3 is prohibition of whip votes and declaration of party whips, which is there because it needs to be, but that means all we need to say about it, I guess. Item 4 is minutes of the previous meeting. You'll all have copies of those. You've had a chance to have a look at them. You've had a chance to look at the letters associated as well. Unless you've got any questions, then we will move on, and I'll assume that you're happy to accept them. Okay, thank you. I can't see anybody objecting to that. Item 5 is public question times. So I don't think we've had any questions, Liz. So that's par for the course, I think. We don't often get many public questions, that's for sure. So that leads us straight on to item 6, Julie, and the annual wellbeing performance report. I must admit I had a look at it and I thought, no, I've got the normal monthly reporting form, but obviously it is a bit different. So over to you. Thanks, Julie.
Yeah, if I could just make a brief introductory comment, if that's okay, Chair. Just wanted to, put on record my huge thanks to Julie and all the officers, not just for the very comprehensive report, but the work that it represents. And also want to point out, obviously, the report itself is just a snapshot of everything that goes on in Child and Family Services, because there's so much that can't be sort of quantified into data in this way. Again, another challenging year, but a lot of positives, as you can see, new ways of working being embedded, and a lot of learning taking place. And you can see in the bit where it's sort of saying what the plans are for next year are. So yeah, just wanted to put on my records the thanks for the incredible hard work that goes on, and I'll hand over to Julie to go through the report.
Okay, thank you, Louise. Julie, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Louise. So this is the first time I think we've produced an annual wellbeing report. So very much welcome any observations or comments of ways that we could improve it for future iterations of it. So we've focused on, in essence, bring it all together, the wellbeing reports that we bring here on a regular basis. And I think I put in my introduction that I think 2022-23 were remembered as a time of severe staffing shortages, both social workers and alternatively qualified staff. We're starting to see now, and Chris probably will touch upon this in his report, but shortage of staff in residential childcare. So that's then bringing further challenges for us as a service. It was also a year that we saw a number of creative solutions. So in spite of the critical staffing issues that we face, we were still able to bring about some new ways of working, some different ways of working. Some of those in response to the workforce challenges. So for example, recruiting a significant number of alternatively qualified staff in the form of family support workers who are sitting in our frontline area social work teams, very much supporting the social workers and being able to do some direct work with children, young people and families, which has been a huge benefit for the service, but also has meant that we've carved a progression pathway for those staff to become qualified social workers of the future. So that's part of our workforce development and our succession planning for those staff. But some of those improvements have been in recognition of the need for us to do things differently so that we can clearly evidence that we are doing what matters in line with our vision for children, young people and families. And that's been right across what we call our continuum of need. So level 1 through to level 4, so the lower level of need to the higher level of need. So we redesignated our youth service on our journey of recovery from COVID, from the pandemic. We have some nationally acclaimed work on contextual safeguarding, and you may recall, Chair, we brought information here previously on the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, and the contextual safeguarding approach is a key part of our Swansea's response to that in relation to understanding and responding to that type of abuse that children suffer when they're exploited. We are in the process of reshaping our support for special guardians. So part of our plan of supporting children to stay living with their families is about how we can support those carers to become special guardians, and they can still stay within a family unit, but they're no longer needing to be looked after by the local authority. And we are completely rethinking the way that those parents are supported where their child is at risk of being taken into care when they're born. So we have a Born into Care initiative, which is really exciting. And again, we're getting some recognition across Wales, certainly through the Association of Directors of Social Services, about our innovative approach that really puts parents, and it's a very thoughtful and sensitive approach in partnership with health, to help parents on that journey if they're not able to have their child with them when they leave hospital after giving birth. And it still continues to be a very busy service with less staff or different staff than we might otherwise have had previously. High demand in our early help hubs, which is a really good and positive sign, because what we're looking to do is shift the balance from statutory intervention to prevention and early intervention. But we have seen some staffing challenges in our early help hubs of late. Some of that is because there's always a natural churn in those areas, so people want to move on and progress. So we are looking at ways we can develop progression pathways in that area so we don't lose staff, but they can progress within the service. We've also had a lot of demand in our single point of contact, but we're very fortunate with our domestic abuse hub and our integrated safeguarding hub, and our response in relation to the academy and bringing expertise for children with disabilities to the front door and undertaking carers assessments. We've really strengthened that first point of contact for a whole range of families, and we have positive feedback around that. And it's also meaning that we can, what we call, slow down cases and work with families, so rather than rushing perhaps, or be seen to be rushing into a child protection investigation or going to a child protection conference, it's how we can support families to create safety and a safety network with them and with the people that support them and are part of their network. So the academy in particular has been a very welcome addition, not only for growing our future social workers, but also preventing some cases from transferring into the area social work teams, where we do still have an acute shortage of social workers. We entered the year with less children on the child protection register and less children looked after. And I was looking back earlier today for an FOI about numbers of children that became looked after going back about 5 years. And you can quite clearly see that Swansea has had less children becoming looked after over that 5-year period, which I think is testament to our approach of supporting children to stay living at home with their families or their wider family, where that's safe to do so. So those less children on the register or looked after is a positive indicator of seeking to prevent children needing statutory intervention. We did also have a number of placement breakdowns, so children that are looked after, the place that they were living, whether it was a foster carer or residential children's home. And some of those foster carers were what we call kinship carers, so that those placements broke down, and we haven't at the moment got enough foster carers to move children onto, which has meant we have been placing more children in residential children's homes than we would ordinarily seek to do so, because that is not the first choice for them. And I think staff from every part of Child and Family Services are pulled together to support each other and teams, going above and beyond their role on many, many occasions, and that's continued well into this year and continues now on an hourly basis. But that means we have been able to assure everybody that we are able to provide a safe and effective service. And now we're getting to grips with our new recording system. It's easier to evidence that, because we have had challenges of getting to grips with that and knowing where to record the information. And everybody recording it in the same place, so we can run off the reports which give you the data, and then I can give you the story behind the data. So that we continue to evolve that system so that it supports practice and doesn't drive practice. So we've got a lot of things off the ground, and we're still working on a range of projects and initiatives which we'll continue to report on here, such as our residential home development, which Chris will touch upon. But I'm very proud to be the head of service. Such dedicated staff. Sorry, it's really tough at the minute. They're all truly awesome. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Sorry, as you were saying, Julie, the report that you're presenting is very positive, and obviously you're very proud of what you're doing as well. I'm sure there'll be members here who've got questions for you. I'll have a few myself, but does anybody at this point in time want to ask any questions? Wendy?
It's not a question, it's Julie getting emotional, which to me means that you care. And it's all working, so that's all I can say.
Chair, I don't know if you can see me on the screen. I have got my hand raised.
Yes, Cheryl. If you would like to speak now.
Okay. Julie, you mentioned having feedback on the report, and when I read it, I thought that it was a very easy to read report. It just laid everything out so well. You can see it at a glance, really, and I applaud you for that report and your staff. And as others have said, your strength of conviction also shows through. Just two questions. One was, well, it's a statement really. You know, when you look that the children on the register are now less than half of what they were many years ago, I think that also is testament to the good work in very difficult circumstances that that your team have gone through. So, you know, that says it all, doesn't it? But just one little question. I noticed that 24, I think it was 24 children were re-referred within the year. And I just wondered if there's any breakdown of the reasons for them having sort of like gone off the child protection register and then been referred back. Is it general sort of like, you know, just breakdown in relationships, or do you have any ideas?
So it will be varied depending on the child's circumstances, but some examples would be there's been a change in family circumstances. So there may be a new partner in the relationship. Quite a common thing at the moment is around the impact of COVID on people's behaviour and their ability, their life is just not how it was before. So their ability to cope perhaps has changed over time. We do look at those cases on a regular basis. We have weekly safeguarding meetings, so our learning and innovation team look at those ones that come back in and go on the register again. And sometimes it can be quite a period of time apart. So it can be 5 years ago, or it could have been 6 or 7 years ago, or it could have been a year ago. But we do look at the circumstances, and it's ordinarily because there's either been another incident that's very different from before because circumstances have changed. And a lot of it, as I say, is just due to some adults and children's lives and recovering themselves as individuals and what that means in the context of COVID and their own life and how they feel about things, really. So yeah, it's quite varied, but we do look at them, and actually the Kath who produced this report is pulling together some themes around that very thing to help us understand and have a little more interrogation and analysis of that data, so we can think about, is there anything we can do differently with other services, not just ourselves, that will help us move forward and reduce those re-referrals going into the future. That's helpful.
Has anybody else got any questions they'd like to ask or put to Julie? Because certainly I would say what Charlotte said was absolutely right, and she remember back in the dark old days of 2009, I guess, when we were looking, I think, at figures about somewhere about 600, I think it was, Cheryl, wasn't it, in terms of looked after children and where we are now. And obviously it's a credit, very much a credit to the department. Department's moved ahead under a couple of heads of department now, and it continues to do so, and that is important. I have got a couple of questions, because I would do, wouldn't I? Because that's the way I tend to be. And a couple of things I don't understand, particularly you've obviously talked about the staff shortages already. I'm not quite sure how serious those are with you at the moment, because you know you're down in numbers. Talking about agency staff, I don't know how many are involved, but that would be an interesting number to know at this stage. You've got a phrase in there about voice and control. Now that's a phrase I've not come across before, as I recollect. So if you'd like to explain that, I'd be grateful for a start. I mean, we'll take it from there then.
Yeah, so in terms of, we have less agency staff now. I think we've got no more than 4 at the moment, 4 agency staff. And we are seeing some benefits from the All Wales Memorandum of Cooperation that's recently been introduced to help us control what we pay. So we're now not paying higher rates than perhaps you would expect to pay. So that's the situation with the agency staff, and we do have had an enormous interest in the academy. So we've recruited. We're looking to recruit 3 additional newly qualified social workers who had a high level of interest. So, and we're moving those social workers from the academy that were in there last year into the area team. So we can see some hope in the future that we can backfill the vacancies that we've been holding for a couple of, well, over a year now.
Yes.
So a very low number of agency staff, particularly compared to other local authorities. So that's really, I think, good for us. On the voice choice and control, it's a key phrase in the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, and something that the Care Inspectorate Wales lead inspector will ask me every time we meet.
Okay.
About how we're evidencing that particularly children are able to exercise their choice and control and have their voice heard. So yeah, that's where it stems from in essence. So
Sorry, it was just a phrase that I
yeah,
hadn't
yeah.
picked up before, I think, in that sense, and I was asking that. The Early Help Hub on page 19. I think probably I mentioned it at the last meeting, in fact, but there's a step change. Looks like a step change between 2 years. Any particular reason for that?
Which I'm just going to the page 19. Yeah.
Page 19.
So following the last scrutiny, where you did quite rightly point that out, so we are, for future monthly reports, we're going to remove that step change, because the reason for the step change is that we started to record things differently. So we could record the whole family, but individually rather than just as a. So the way we record it has changed, and that's why it looks different. It's not that there's been any particular change in the way we deliver the service. It's just been about, with the introduction of the new system, we took the opportunity to rethink the way we record information, so we have a more accurate picture of the numbers and different types of people and children we're supporting in the service. Yes. So this is our first attempt at, so again, very much welcome your feedback. So we do regular auditing, and even every month we include some themes on the findings of the cases that we specifically audited. So what Kath and the team have done is brought that together to try and give a whole picture of everything that we've looked at, to evidence really that how the learning that we're pulling out of the auditing and what that's telling us in terms of the quality of practice. Sort of the qualitative element really of the numbers. So I think what it tells us is that overall the quality of practice remains strong, and that we are good at looking holistically at things like risks, and we're focusing on things like deregistrations of children at first review conference, because that's normally quite a negative indicator. And also where we have decisions around non-registrations. So I think it's trying to show that if you look at the percentage worries and risks clearly evidenced in analysis, on the graph on the right hand side, that's a really good percentage that was looked at in conference. So sorry, at the section 40, so at the child protection end, so much earlier on, so really good understanding that this is the right decision to go to conference, because we quite clearly have done a really good analysis of the risks. So that's a strength, really. And you could say that you would expect there to be, if you look at the lines below, when you get to conference, that the safety planning will evolve and become stronger, because you've got more multi-agency input at the conference to understand what are the safety and risk factors and how can we work together to make them as strong and as positive as they can be. Does that make sense? But I think maybe Kath would have been here today, but she's on leave. So maybe she could talk us through that in more detail.
Sorry, before I turned the mic on, and I just said perhaps we'll have a session on it so we can explain it and understand it better. And I think that might be useful, because it looks like it's a useful bit of information. Because I was just wondering what the spider's web was doing there at that point in time. At least that's what I thought it looked like.
Yeah, and the spider's web is quite a common tool that is used particularly in early help to try and show distance travelled. So that you normally use, the farther out you go, it's normally a positive indicator, but it's not being used in that way in this context. So I think it might be helpful to Kath to explain. And then that might be something that's helpful to include in the monthly reports, maybe not every month, but maybe every quarter perhaps.
Yeah, that makes sense, I think. Page 35, if we make. I was looking at the number of carer reviews there, and the number of carer reviews completed within timescales between June and March seemed quite low in particular. I don't know if they are particularly, but that's the way they look to me. The carer reviews completed within timescales between June and March, very low, which implies that they were being done late, I think.
Yes, I think it would have been helpful to include the number of care reviews that were due. Oh, but they were clear to. Oh, I see what you're saying now. Yeah. Okay.
You did what, 66 between June and March? 20. Oh, I see, 22, 23, and then 11 completed in the same period.
Yeah, and that will undoubtedly be because we were focusing on the approval of carers, as opposed to because we do annual reviews, and we know that we did have a backlog of care reviews which we're now on top of, which we report on a monthly basis because of just keeping an eye on that. So what you'll see in the monthly reports now is that we are now on top of, and they're all on time now, apart from the odd exception.
So basically, I need to be remembering this is an annual report. It's the report at the end of the day.
So we have caught up now, and it is a much improved picture.
Okay. And finally, page 38, I think. We can turn that quickly. Yeah, I was looking at the again, I think. We're talking about the number of initial conferences held within timescales has gone up quite dramatically. Whether that's good in the sense that you're getting them done on time, or whether there's been a big increase in the number of review conferences, I think is a question I was looking at there more particularly.
It's very rare we have a review conference that's out of time frame, to be fair. And I think most local authorities operate in the same way for review conferences. You normally allow quite some flexibility so that if circumstances mean that somebody's not available, you've still got enough time to keep it in time frame. So it's very rare. You'll see in the annual report that Damien and Alison bring for the conference service and independent reviewing officers that we have a pretty strong track record of having those review conferences on time. Okay. And it's been a challenge to have data that we're confident in, for that particular year because of the introduction of the new recording system. So it's been a lot of manual work to keep on top of evidencing that the data is correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Once again, I'll ask anybody got any other questions as far as this report is concerned? In that case, I'll say thank you very much, Julie, for it. As we've already said, as already been said, it's very comprehensive, it's very positive, and I think it is a credit to the department and yourself in particular. So thank you very much for that. If I can now then, on that basis, move on to item 7, the residential care services. Obviously, we got Chris here. I don't know if you're going to go straight in, Chris, or whether somebody wants to introduce it for you.
Yeah, well, again, thank you very much for the report. It's great to have this opportunity to update. I think Chris came last year to kind of say where we are. So it's great that we have made a lot of good progress in some of those areas. But as Julie alluded to, it is very challenging at the moment. And I'm sure Chris will expertly explain that to you.
Expertly, you set the bar quite high now, thank you. So Prynawn da pawb, good afternoon everybody. So yeah, I've tried to keep the report in the similar sort of format that I reported on about 10 months ago. I thought it's important for us to sort of revisit the service aims just to make sure. Obviously there's new members here today, so I'll read them pretty much verbatim as they're in, but with a lot of the text, what I'll do, I'll just give you summaries rather than go through it all in a lot of detail. And again, if there's any questions after I've completed, then I'm happy to answer them. Sorry. Okay, so children's residential service aims to provide safe, stable and suitable living accommodation to meet a wide range of needs, to improve well-being and stability for children and young people and support them using trauma-informed approaches, to live close to home where safe to do so, and also reduce out-of-county placements, unregulated provision and escalation of need and risk, and improve longer-term outcomes for children and young people in adulthood. So what I will do as I discuss some of the improvements that we've got, some of the current and some of the progressive ideas that we have in and around some of the provisions that we've got, I'll also link into some of the challenges that are, I won't say hindering, but a slightly delaying us to probably get to where we are in our aims. I think it's really important, similarly to what Julie sort of alluded to earlier, is with regards to the staffing seems to be the biggest one as it stands at the moment. So I'll go into a little bit more detail as I go further on down the report for that. So home number 1. Again, I'll discuss this one in a lot more detail towards the end of the report. So this is the registered home that we have in a semi-rural location. Our current statement of purpose is going under review at the moment. We were aware from several reports that we've had that sometimes the length of stay that the young people had, we had sort of like a 3-month trajectory for the young people that were coming in, which would be labelled as a short stay provision. Due to the current landscape, we've had to relook at that because we were setting ourselves up to fail quite a lot just because of the lack of offer that we've kind of seen to really meet the complex. I know Julie doesn't like the complex needs because she likes me to give a little bit more detail, but the more acute complex needs that we have with these young people, making it very, very difficult for them to move on to certain placements. So what we're doing, we're reviewing the statement of purpose, we're reviewing how the quality of care has improved for those young people to look over a longer period, and that could be up to 6 to 12 months. It's still currently supporting 3 older teenagers. Probably since I think the last 10 months, we've only been a month where we've had a capacity of 2. Other than that, we've been at full capacity, which is, it's not a good thing that we've got young people there, but it's a really good thing that we're utilising our sort of resource in that way. We are currently looking at using our capital funding, our regional capital fund, to propose 2 bungalows, so for two move-on bungalows. You would have seen in one of our aims, we're looking at how we support the transition through 16, 18 and into adulthood. Currently, again, with I suppose the lack of provision that we have out there externally, we're trying to utilise the bids in the best way that we can to see if we can really support these young people that aren't ready to move on into independent living completely themselves, but people who are care experienced, that are potentially within our care system, that haven't got the skill sets or the life skills just yet to move on into that independent living. So it's more of a protected environment, and that is looking to be on the same site as we've got Home 1 as well. So these young people would have more independence, but they still have a support network around them as far as a full staffing complement in a home that is probably about 100 to 200 yards away. The benefits of that, as I said, young people have continued access to a range of support, learning, employment, training, education, contact with family, significant others. Again, I won't read through it all because, you know, a lot of it is going to be very similar throughout a lot of the proposals that we've got. But basically, it's just making sure that they've almost got an additional support network when they are going into, you know, in transition into adulthood and taking on the next part of their pathway. Home number 2. On writing this report, it was in its final stages. It's now been fully registered. So as of the 27th, we now have a second home that's registered, which is in the urban area. It is a 3-bedroom property. Again, we're looking at a medium to long-term placement. And again, we're looking at how these provisions for these young people that move in aren't necessarily short stay, but can offer them a level of stability where we can support them to progress and sort of move on and transition into more independent living. Again, using the capital money, we're looking at proposed rear extensions to the accommodation. This was a recommendation with Care Inspectorate Wales just to support a bigger office and potentially to create an additional bedroom area. We are really in the initial stages of looking what that development looks like at the minute, because the main focus was just getting the property registered and the CIW. So the next steps is really now accelerating what the proposal is under the capital bid to see if we can sort of maximise the bed space and the space and area around the home. Home number 3. So again, this has probably been from the last time I spoke to you. We just had the keys, or we just purchased this property or properties. So it still remains within the planning stages. There has been multiple reworkings on these properties. Again, we're using internal services through our planning departments, through our surveying departments, and we're trying to get it right. And it seems as if we do come across quite a lot of challenges. Bats being one of them, parking, highways, lots of things that are putting some challenges in that obviously takes time when you're looking at relocation and species of bats. And I'm learning a whole different terminology around buildings and LEC and tech and all these other different terminologies. But there's so many interdependencies on trying to get this right and trying to make it, you know, we're not going for good, we're going for sort of platinum in these areas. And, you know, to get that, it comes at a cost. And sometimes when you're making just even slight differences and slight changes to adapt, you know, we've just got to make sure that we are being very sensible around it. And because that budget could escalate quite quickly in these times. So it is very much in the planning stages still. And like I said, we're probably on maybe our 14th rework of the building as it stands at the moment. So when this is complete, again, it's going to be more for the home number 3 is going to be for the complex needs of people who've been either stepped up or about to be stepped down from secure units. Hence why we're looking at this provision. It really needs to be really fit for purpose for young people who have got sort of the highest needs possible. Again, adjoined to home number 4. So this will be more of a transient provision for young people who are on emergency placements. We've discussed the high number that we're having through in this area at the moment. So we're just looking at currently probably building that to the same spec, but obviously having the potential to downgrade the severity of protection or the severity of safety in this building in line with what we're doing, sort of a red, amber, green profile. So for the young people that are more high profile, then all of the different, I suppose, adaptations would need to be at the maximum. For the young people that have got a lower profile as far as behavioural or high risk, then we're able to sort of take it down to more of an amber-green profile as far as the adaptations are concerned. Again, because in a lot of these situations with young people that are coming in an emergency, we don't really know the profiles of the young people. Every move to them, you know, it can be quite traumatic. So we thought by having the flexibility to be able to have, you know, the I suppose at our disposal, making it as safe as possible is the key in this in these areas. So we've got flexibility, like I said, to cover people who are sort of green, amber, and red profiling. And it's not something that we do as far as pigeonholing young people. It's just what we do from a health and safety perspective to make sure that we've got the right sort of equipment and the right adaptations to support the young people's needs. Home number 5. This is a proposal as it stands. So we are looking at the data, we're looking at some of the demand and the type and the demographics of the young people that are coming through at the moment. You would have sort of seen in our initial aims around being able to provide therapeutic support for children and young people, and this home, what we're hoping for is that for this to be long term, which is sort of multiple years within these environments. And to do that, the idea is that we're going to be working with our internal therapy services, so we would have a therapeutic input or clinician on site, and that potentially is 5 days a week. And that would also meet the criteria for CIW for us, Care Inspectorate Wales, for us to say that we've got a therapeutic offer with at least within our settings for the portfolio within Swansea. Again, a lot of the risks that I've identified through here and a lot of the support around participation, recreational activities, emotional support, that is what we do across all of the homes, but it would be definitely through a trauma-informed lens in the way that we do deliver this service, specifically in this home. And I think that is going to be sort of us really working key with the young people that we have currently within our care, as well as working with our internal therapy services to make sure that we set up the environment to meet the needs of these young people. I'll always put a caveat at the end of it where I'll say, you know, as we're growing our portfolios, even though we've got quite specific statements of purposes across these homes, as we add more, we can change the statements of purposes, providing that we go out to all of our stakeholders to make sure they're happy. And what this does, it gives us a lot more flexibility that when demand and when the sort of high numbers of young people that are coming through and we can understand their needs through further assessment, it does give us flexibility to be able to adjust our settings to meet their needs. So some of the challenges, again, I kind of give a brief overview the last presentation around the limit profit, which has been driven by Welsh Government. Again, the idea is that they're driving profit from the care looked after children, which is a key component in the radical agenda for children's social services. The aim is to ensure that public money invested in the care of children looked after does not profit individuals or corporate entities, but instead is spent on children's services to deliver better experiences and outcomes for children. So, as I stated, as of April the 1st, 2026, there won't be any private sector company that will be able to register for profit. It'll all have to become under a not-for-profit banner. As I sort of, we discussed the last time about this could have a potential impact on the current market and the landscape, as I've alluded to earlier, and we're seeing it already with a lot of the providers that have maybe bought in and now either retracting or looking at ways to maybe co-produce their provisions. We have some that are, you know, actively seeking out how they can really work closely with us as councils to make sure that they're doing it correctly, that they've got the correct offer. But with the withdrawal of some of the placements, what we're seeing is that the options that we've got are becoming a little bit more limited as it stands at the moment. And what we find, you know, similarly to what I've seen with the delays that we're having quite a lot with planning and with our ideas with growth within in-house, the amount of demand that is coming through at the minute is very difficult for us to be able to meet that in-house in its entirety because of a lot of the challenges that we have with the progression of buildings, etc. So we are still using a lot of external providers as it stands at the moment, but the idea is that we're hoping to sort of minimise that as we move forward. So emergency bespoke placements, again, similarly, because we can't accelerate the building sort of our hopes for what we need for the building in a timely manner that we would like. The registration then comes as an additional sort of delay or as an additional challenge when those buildings are in place. So what we're finding at the minute is, unfortunately, we can't pause the demand of the amount of young people that are coming through. So a lot of the properties that we're having at the minute are going into what's called emergency placements. And this, what this basically means is young people are going into homes in unregulated environments, so they're not regulated under what's called RISCA, so the registration and inspection framework from CIW. Our intentions and the way that we are able to support these to minimise risks is by putting care experienced staff, some from our own relief pools, so social workers, social teams, preventative, as well as statutory teams, as well as using care sector agency staff to be able to support these, and then having management oversight as a quality assurance process. The way that we sort of change the model is we are trying to basically treat them as regulated provisions. So all the paperwork, all the policies, procedures, all the ways that we sort of manage and quality assure. The attempt is just to try and make sure that these unregulated placements are managed in as safe a way as possible by basically doing what we do in-house. The negative impact of the young people, because we need to speak about that as well, is that sometimes because of the lack of consistency we have in these homes, it does mean that young people can move in these. So when they are in these situations, if we can only get a property for a month or 2 weeks, it does mean sometimes that if we can't get extensions on those and their situations don't change, whether it means the searches for foster carers or residential care come back as unsuccessful, it does a lot of the times mean that these young people are then uprooted to go to another emergency placement. And obviously it has a negative impact on them and obviously the staff that are supporting them. But like I said, what we are trying to do is the situations in some instances that we have no control over. What we have got control over is just trying to make sure that we get the best quality assurance and the best quality of care that we can to wrap around these young people as they go through these situations. I mentioned about the purchasing and development. I've said about sort of the complexities and the dependencies, so I won't again labour that. Julie sort of spoke about recruitment. It was our hope when we had our staffing grades regraded. We managed to look at the job descriptions for an RCCO, so that's for a residential childcare officer. We were able to get and they're regrading them to move up a grade, which we thought would potentially be a more incentive, a bigger incentive for people to apply and to take on this role. It's not necessarily had the impact that we would have liked, even though we are recruiting into this environment. It's just not quick enough. And as you can see from the stats there, even with the amount of people that are filling in application forms, we're really looking at only really 70% that are even interviewable, because we are setting the standards high for what we want for the carers for our young people. We have in the past maybe taken people on thinking there's lots of training and development, sort of potential for this, but that can take a year or 2 years before they're at the standard. We need really people who can hit the ground running to provide the best care possibly for these young people from the get-go. So saying that, what we're trying to do now is really take on the biggest amount. So say, for example, we recruit 10, we want 8 of those to be at the gold standard, and maybe looking at 2 that we could potentially bring along to be able to be supported through training, etc. So we don't want to alienate the people that are new to the sector, because obviously we want to bring in new people to the sector, but also we've got to make sure, like I said, that the quality of care is there for the young people right from the start. Because in some situations, if there is one-to-one working, we've got to be really careful that we can't have inexperienced people in that environment, because like I said, the young people can display some behaviours that need specialist support, and a lot of people that have experience need to be in those environments to be able to stop things escalating, etc. Okay, so next steps. Again, continue with the recruitment drive. So we've got an advert out now. We've been successful in recruiting a manager and assistant manager, and we've got another assistant manager post that's currently out as well. So we're hoping that we're bringing in just a little bit more resilience within these environments. So when we are, like I said, able to really nail down these buildings and get properties so we can start staffing it and start getting young people into these environments, then we'll have that network of support already in place that will be used to our policies, used to our procedures, have all the training, etc. The identifying and purchasing of additional properties. So I think we're into double figures now. I think 11 at the last count, which was about a fortnight ago. So trying to look at, like I said, home number 5, which is the 4 or 5 bedroom property as it stands at the moment. The market isn't great at the moment, so we've got to be very careful where we are situating these homes, and that is to protect the young people in and around, because like I said, they need a lot of protective factors around the safety of their environments. We need to look at community cohesion in and around making sure that the people in the neighbourhoods within that are happy and are prepared to work with us to get the best outcomes for these young people. But at the minute, the location is the biggest issue that we've just not been able to have any furtherance on at the moment. So we've got parts of our commissioning team that are looking. We've got parts of our res care team that are looking. We're on sort of Peter Allen, Zoopla 86, all those. So every time emails are coming through, we're sort of really excited, and we've been doing multiple visits to multiple properties, but none that have really are fit for purpose for what we want for this last bit of, for the next bit of development. So that is the next step as far as an overall. I've go into more specific into Teenant, because I know that there were questions around that. So did you want me to take questions at this stage for what I've discussed, and then,
I think that would be sensible.
yeah, is that okay?
And I'll ask members now what questions you have. Any? Okay, Kevin, you've got your hand
Yes,
up, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dave, for another excellent report. And I know that the staff are doing a fantastic job on behalf of these children. But I don't have a question on the report. It's something that's been happening with the Teenant home. A lot of the staff are leaving themselves down when going to work, as I've met with about 30 residents and the local PCSO lately, because these staff are speeding up the road. And obviously they've all got children with a park nearby, and they're concerned about the children getting hurt. As I say, we're working with the local PCSO, who's got the number plates of the cars that are doing it, and she's supposed to be speaking to the manager up there. But it is causing a lot of issues around that area. We're expecting the neighbourhood to work with us, but then we get these people leaving us down.
I think this is possibly a question that you need to take up outside the meeting if you can. I think it'd be more sensible to do it that way, and then you can
Yeah,
sort out the
okay, I
problem.
thought it just because we were talking about that particular home, I thought.
Okay. I understand where you're coming from, but I think it's probably better to try and resolve that situation outside of the meeting here.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Mark, question, comment?
Good afternoon, all, and thank you for the welcome, Paxton. Dave, the only thing that concerns me so far, and excuse my naivety, could you explain the difference quickly between regulated and unregulated? Would it mean with unregulated that perhaps, for example, the risk assessments aren't as intense as the norm? Thank you.
Okay. So as far as unregulated and regulated, that is purely from a statutory perspective with CIW. So Care Inspectorate Wales have approved and have risk assessed the building and have basically sort of given us the rubber stamp and the go ahead to be able to progress with placing young people there. Unregulated, even though it sounds as if all of that is the opposite, it's very much not the same. So the risk assessments and everything, if anything, are done more robustly because we know that we haven't got that regulatory body sort of overseeing those. So what we, like I said, very similarly, what we're trying to do is making sure that the unregulated are treated exactly the same as the regulated. So just from a word perspective, it just means that CIW haven't regulated that provision.
That's smashing. Thank you very much for explaining.
Okay.
Cheryl, it's unusual for me to say ladies last, but my apologies for that.
No problem at all, Chairman. I just wondered, I think it's very exciting that we're actually keeping children within county, and I do think that it's the most appropriate. But when you're looking at all of these properties, I'm just wondering what challenges you might be finding when you're consulting with residents. Obviously, as part of the planning application, it will say if you've got anything to any planning that needs to be done, it will give the purpose of the property. And I just wondered what challenges you've come across. And I suppose really Kevin's question highlights perhaps some of the challenges that you might be facing.
Okay, thank you. So we have sort of really, and I'm using the word robust, we've got to under sort of the CIW guidance side of it. So we've got what's called location and premises assessments that need to be basically the first line and the first step that we take before we even go into what would be sort of community discussions or our integrated impact assessments. So before we even sort of liaise with communities, etc. Some of the challenges that we've had on the run up to some of the new properties is purely just on location. They just have not been fit for purpose. They've either been too close to railway lines, there's been too many sort of hazards around the roads, etc. But so it is pretty much just where that premise location stands. With what we've got with home number 3 and 4, we are in dialogue with the community as it stands. They have got some concerns around safety. They've got concerns around the sort of situation of where that property is. There's been lots of challenges that's come back with planning that we've been able to discuss through with them as well. And we've also learned a lot about the way that we communicate with the community, and obviously getting in early and having those conversations is vital. And that is something that we're going to be using it as far as a learning curve for us at every step of the way when we're looking at developing these and building in new properties as we go forward. Did that answer your question, or was there another part to it? Sorry.
No,
That's okay.
I think I just, as you were saying, and I could see you were so excited, and you were saying about, going out with estate agents and doing various visits. And we've had a planning application in between Scrutiny and Cocket Ward, which is going to a hearing because the application was refused. But I just, my heart went out to you thinking, oh, this can be so difficult, because people have a perception. And then, as I said, bringing Kevin's question, which I'm sure you will be able to answer out to the question, but these are all the things that get compounded when people have concerns, and then it's, oh, I told you so. And I think it is making sure that communication continues. But as I say, my heart went out to you when you said about how excited you were, and I thought, oh God, what's going to happen when you speak to the community. But I think you seem to have it going well, so congratulations.
Yeah, if I could sort of just come back on that, I think obviously naturally communities are going to be a little reticent when they sort of see that in sort of stark black and white, that there's a children's home or whatever, a residential home opening on their doorstep. But I think as you say, if it would be great if members, if that it comes up in their wards, help with the community cohesion in that respect, and really help officers make that bridge, and are putting forward a really positive case on just how important these are and how well run they are by our staff, and how we can work together to allay those fears, really. So I think yes, and that's what Chris and the team have been doing with the one that's at planning at the moment. So hopefully that will come forward soon.
Okay. We are obviously in a state of flux at the moment because of the requirements in terms of eliminating profit. Now, from what I can see there, if my figures are right, you're looking at accommodation for about 21, 22 of that sort of order, number of residents within those homes. What's our current level that we have in terms of having children or young people in residential homes? How does it match with that? And are we still going to struggle?
So as far as our internal provision is concerned, we've got a 4-bed offer. So that would have been home number 1 and home number 2 as far as our registered provisions. Young people in external, I think we're talking, I think it's about 30 young people that we're using external providers currently. So you can imagine the reason that we're trying to accelerate the process of getting our in-house provisions to the place where we'd like it is obviously to eradicate a lot of that external provider use.
I understand that, but we're still going to be dependent on external providers then, aren't we? And we are, as I understand it, seeing a growth of that business in Swansea. A number of additional residential care homes have been brought into operation, as I understand it. It seems strange because other counties out in England will be able to send people here, but we can't ourselves. Understand the reason and the argument behind it, but we are short, aren't we, at the moment, of residential care, and we have to find some way of overcoming that. And it looks like from that basis it's going to take some time before we get to a situation where we'd be self-sufficient.
And I think it's probably, the reality is we will never be 100% self-sufficient, because it's probably going to be really difficult for us to be able to confidently say we can meet every child's needs, because the circumstances are different. What would really help is if Welsh Government would publish what their definition is of not-for-profit, because the providers that we're working with, we think their motives are not profit. They're there altruistically because they care about children and want them to be local. But in the absence of knowing what the definition is from Welsh Government, they don't know what they're working with. So they don't know whether from 2026 they're able to continue to be registered, but they are registered at the moment. So we have some hope and confidence that certainly a couple of the local providers who are Swansea based, we would like to continue working with them, recognising we can never 100% meet every child's needs ourselves. So that's part of the stumbling block of the challenges we have at the moment that's maybe holding some people back. And we can't physically go at the pace we need to meet all of that demand because the system just isn't configured that way. It takes time to find somewhere, go through the registration process, go through the planning process, make the alterations. It can take up to, some local authorities we've spoken to say can take up to 2 years, depending on the location of the building, etc.
What's the general feeling in this respect across Wales? Are we getting any feedback on that?
Okay, so yeah, I meet on a monthly basis with the responsible individuals from each of the authorities, which is basically the RI. You're responsible for doing sort of the mini inspections in each of the homes or in the environment, in the counties that you're working in. It's exactly the same. They're just seeing they haven't got the capacity to meet the demand that is coming through. The demographics of the children and young people that are coming through are slightly different. Also, the asks maybe from the smaller counties are slightly different, but when you look at it from comparison from maybe Cardiff, and when we've been talking to colleagues in Wrexham as well, they're very quite similar numbers and similar situations that we're in. There are a number of solutions that they're coming at, but again, it looks as if it's very, very heavily based on external provision as it stands at the moment. And as Julie said, because we don't know the definition of what that looks like in 2026, looking at stability for these children and young people to put them in these arenas at quite a high cost for it to be withdrawn in a 2-year period. We've just got to balance making sure that we've got, stability and the right care for these children and young people. But it's a national issue as it stands at the moment.
So where do we need more direction coming from? Welsh Government, do you think? I'm sure you'll take that back.
Yes, absolutely. I've got coming up shortly another cabinet member, social services and wellbeing cabinet members networking meeting with the deputy minister. So I think this is one of the topics on the agenda. So I will definitely be feeding that through and reporting back on what the progress is.
I don't know if there's any other general questions in respect to this now. If not, we'll move on to just the situation in Tynant, because we have been looking at the situation in Tynant for a couple of years now, I think. So if you want to take us through that now, Chris, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Okay, so I've started off with just a few stats because I was trying to sort of think of some of the questions that were asked last time. So what I've done, I've just put a little bit of information in, and then I've looked pretty much just to include what the inspection report said from the most recent, and very much in the voice and control, because that is part of what we're trying to do and what is CIWR inspecting us on. What I've tried to do then is list quite a lot of feedback that we've had from children, young people and stakeholders in this part. So yeah, the average age of the young people is 15, age range from 14 to 17, and the proximity of ages. It is an indicator about how, we are trying to make sure that we're matching the right people in these environments. So age is a huge, is a huge indicator and a huge metric that we look at around here, especially with some of the needs that we've got for the young people. So having them at that higher teenage, higher adolescent age is something that we know that we are plugging a gap, because that seems to be where we are struggling when we go into external providers as it stands at the moment. So we know that we've got that bit right as far as Tynant is concerned. 5 young people have been white British, and 1 young person was Afghan. The 5 young people spoke English and as their preferred language. 1 spoke Dari. However, he was able to speak limited English and was supported through a translator. We don't have any physical disabilities, and none were practicing a religion at that point of reporting. The average placement duration is 14.6 weeks, which is about 102 days. And again, it's just to really reiterate that even sometimes we're putting arbitrary timelines on the length of time these young people stay. It's usually to appease sort of CIW to make sure we're not having these young people float or getting stagnant, etc. But you know, it's really important that no matter what timescales that we put, if these young people, that it's not right for them to move on, or you know, if the circumstances change and we are the best people to support them, then we take that challenge to CIW if it needs extending over sort of the arbitrary sort of medium or short term you know, provisions that we've sort of stated. Every young person, which has slightly changed from the last time, is now allocated 3 key workers when they go into TNAT. It used to be 1, but this just helps with the resilience model, and also helps the young people really sort of develop you know, relationships with trusted adults, which is really supporting, and also gives them a voice and a choice over the 3 instead of just the 1. Because what we were finding is that if they have a breakdown in communication or breakdown in relationship with that 1, sometimes it may have left them a little bit isolated, but now we're kind of just building a bit of a resilience model in there just to give them as much opportunity to have their voice heard as possible. Young people continue to have a full range of activities to choose from, which support their wellbeing development and fit around their other commitments. And lots and lots of direct work sessions, some really well attended, others around life skills and chores, maybe not so much, but all of the fun activities, we've got almost like 100% success rate with a lot of these at the moment. So again, I'll read through these. So young people's feedback, we take snapshots every 3 months, or if young people are, so we've got initial, midway, and sort of towards the end. They do look at me and roll their eyes every time I come out and bring sort of the questionnaires and give them the QR codes that they need to complete, because they're like, oh, not you again, making me answer all these different questions. So we are thinking about more creative ways to get feedback. So this is what we've had so far anyway. So one young person commented that I feel staff can be too parental in some situations. They feel they need to mother us. Yes, staff make me feel very safe. My key workers, S&R, they help me with my direct and life work skills. My relationship with the key workers are okay. My number 1 and number 2, the J and C, they're very funny, talkative, supportive, and are really interested in me. This young person, the one who gave the last comment, he recently took part in the childcare officer interviews that we've got, obviously, which I mentioned further up in the report. And when I asked, you know, is this something that you would like to do one day? You know, we would really sort of, young people would benefit from your skill set of coming through the system, etc., knowing what you know. And he said, you know, I found it helpful to know the process, but, you know, I'm definitely not going to be working in this environment because I just couldn't put up with the kids. And that just came out of his mouth, as they say, from the mouths of babes. And it you know, it just brought a wry smile to my face. So I thought it'd be good to include that in the report. Yeah, and very much, you know, I think when you mention about a lot of stigmas that attach to these environments and a lot of myths that come with people who don't necessarily understand sort of lots of the nuances and what we are trying to do around quality of care, I thought having that family feedback, and I've got it in abundance of positive. I probably could have filled the report with really positive family feedback. It's something that we do, or we are going to be using in the future when we do take to the community cohesion events, when we are initially thinking about, you know, putting these venues in their location. So it says, you know, we're extremely happy with the way that the young person is cared for and looked after. We feel she's really, really supported and cared for. We feel in a safe cocoon, in a really good place. We know she's been taken care of. It's been massive for us. We've been able to live a normal life alongside her, supporting her with the team. It's been huge for us. We're also grateful. So the context of normal around that, you know, it may seem, you know, that not the right terminology, but what she was saying, that the mum was saying, there's another sibling within the home, and the young person's behaviours before the intervention took place were so erratic and, you know, having an impact on them and having an impact on her work, her husband's work, and they just felt as if it was almost like an alien life. That's the way that she's described it previously. So what they felt is by having that support with a wraparound service, I think they were able to settle things down and things were normal, knowing that their young person was cared for and supported in that way. I know that sometimes normal can see, you know, I just wanted to sort of put a bit of context into that. Another family member said, you know, there's 100% commitment. We always feel the same level of security and interest and cooperation with all the staff. I just think it's an amazing place. I know it feels safe, and I know she's cared for. And this again is one of the key ones. You know, I've never felt judged at all, never felt awkward, which can easily happen in our circumstance. We've never felt anything negative. Stakeholder feedback. So this has come from social workers, from fast workers, from police potentially that visit. It can come from independent review officers. So everybody that's involved. And kept up to date with views. I'm kept up to date and views are passed on to me. So his voice is being heard. We're trying to prepare him for independence. There's realistic well-being goals. It's evident the key workers want to do their best for him. Key workers are responsive and nurturing their approach. I'm really conscious of the time, so I'm just going to give one example from each of the headings, if that's okay, and then I'll move on. So staff feedback. I only started here in November. I was really made to feel welcome. All of the staff team are amazing and always there to answer any questions I may have. I feel totally supported in my job by staff and by management. So I suppose the important bit and the bit that you really wanted to get to the crux to now is around the inspection, which again I think from the last time that I came in, maybe September or October, we were pretty much imminent, ready for that inspection to take place in December. It actually took place in November. Some of the things that we had priority notices on. So just to give you an sort of a further sort of understanding, a priority notice, you get an action plan for improvements. If some of those action plans aren't completed, you get an area for an improvement, and then if the area improvement isn't completed by the next time you visit, you get what's called a priority action notice. So the last time we had 5 priority action notices over TNANT because of the way that we've been inspected with CIW. These were around impact assessments and matching processes, admissions, paperwork, staff supervision, training, employment education, training, as well as activity was put into one because it was about the offer, about the quality of offer, and then the review of the statement of purpose. So I've just basically pulled the extract straight from the report that we had. But in the main, the feedback that we had is just there's been significant improvement since the last time they visit. All of the PANs or the priority notices were taken away. We had one area improvement, which was to do with our provider assessment. That was being revised there and then, and they were happy with the paperwork. So I'm more than confident that the next time they visit, we will have a clean sheet without any sort of notices or areas for improvement hanging over us. There was just really big improvements in every area that they inspected in and where they inspect on regulation. So there's regulation in RISCA from 1 right to 83. Lots of subsections of those regulations, but on the 2 regulations that they sort of drilled down on, there was about between 10 and 12 subsections of those. So it was almost, even though it was a focused inspection, it was a very, very heavy inspection, pretty much looking at all of the quality of care and how we put our provisions together. I think the admission side of it had been coming up consistently about us getting it wrong and getting the matching wrong and getting the impact assessments wrong, and that's something that we really tried hard to make work. And up until this point, and I'm going to touch wood, it seems to be working okay as it stands at the moment. Again, I'm not going to read through everything. I'll just pick up the salient views where they say that young people have told the inspectors that they're happy, that they love and care. The care staff. They're understanding. They do their best to keep us safe. It's been terrible anywhere else where I've been, and I'm making progress. It's TNANT. It's the only place that I've ever liked, and I thought that coming from an inspector in a report as well, is it's like I said, it's pure, and it's from out the mouth of babe, and that I think is sometimes the most important bits that we need in these reports. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, Chris, thank you very much. Anybody got any questions on TNANT? Just to say then, from that point of view, it's something been going on for a couple of years now with CIW. You're coming to the end of the process, hopefully, where they're still unhappy by the sound of things. So it's getting better all the time. That's progress, and I'm sure that we will be coming back shortly to tell us that they've given you a clean bill of health. We look forward to that. But thank you for the work that's been going on there. There has been, it was necessary. I don't think there was any argument about that, and we've kept an eye on it as a result of that. In that sense, we'll expect to see you back in the not too distant future. But thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions now? No. Okay. I don't know quite how this feeds into what the conversation we had earlier, but that's another matter, I guess. In terms of the number of residential placements we have available to us internally, although you are going to generate more on that site, aren't you, as I understand it. Anyway, thank you very much for the presentation. There's no other questions, and at that point in time, I'll say also to Louisa as well. Thank you for your input on that. If you think we can give you any support in terms of a letter to the Welsh Government in terms of the problems you've got, let us know, and we will certainly be happy to do that for you. Okay, but we'll let you come back to that. Come back to us for that if that's what you want. Okay. In that case, I will move on to the next item on the agenda, and a final item on the agenda. I'll say thank you very much to the officers. In the meantime, you can stay to listen to the work plan. It's going to take all of 30 seconds, so it won't be that onerous, I suppose. But you can go in the meantime if you wanted to. Meeting in September will be 2 items basically as we have it at the moment, and it's a presentation by young carers. Without Gavin along, who's usually pretty enthusiastic, to put it mildly, I think, which is a fair way of putting it. And the adolescent strategy and action plan. So I'll say thank you very much to the officers for your attendance and for the reports you presented. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming along today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Meeting at that point.
Before you finish, can I give my apologies for the 13th of September? I will not be in the country.
Well, are we exporting you? Are we, Sue, or what?
And she's not coming with
Yes.
me, I can assure you.
I was going to say on the 13th, I'm going to have to attend remotely because I'm going up to Llandudno for the WLGA conference, but I'll
Okay.
log on.
Okay. Thank you very much.